My name is Crystal. I am the marketing manager for iTracks, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to today's guest speaker. Dr. Janet Salmons is a true pioneer in the world of online qualitative research, and I do not use that word lightly. She just finished a fellowship at the Center for Advanced Internet Studies. She has written numerous books on qualitative research, including one called Doing Online Qualitative Research. So she is a true expert. Her list of accolades are too far to go through here. She's got a awesome blog called When the Field is Online that I hope you guys will subscribe to. And we are absolutely privileged to have her as a collaborator here today for our webinar and just in general. We're a big fan of Dr. Salmons. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, and good morning, everyone. I'm happy to have a chance to talk with you from beautiful Colorado. And this is the miracle of these technologies, that we have a chance to communicate across the miles. So as Crystal was mentioning, I have been working on qualitative methodology for online research for quite a while, and am now editing a newsletter and doing webinars and presentations like this. So just like to share a little bit about what I've learned and what I'm continuing to learn. So the topics we'll explore today, first looking at holistic design framework and thinking about the ways that technology kind of works within a study and how we communicate either synchronously or asynchronously. And then we'll look at some options for using visual interactions and have time for some question and answer. So I certainly don't think that one size fits all, and there are certainly times when we have the opportunity to do research in the field when it is in person. So you know, sometimes we might even combine that kind of in-person research with online research. But I think you know, a couple of the advantages are that, you know, we can engage with participants and of course access other kinds of resources and source materials from anywhere. And we can have these very complex exchanges and record the whole thing so we have that data for analysis. But before I go on, I really like to define my terms when I'm talking about something, so we're all on the same virtual page. And the definition that I use for qualitative online research, first of all, thinking of this as kind of an umbrella term to describe methods and methodological traditions for using information and communication technologies to study perceptions, experiences, or behaviors through verbal or visual expressions, actions, or writings. And I use the term information and communication technologies to cover kind of a broad range, you know, not only kind of being online as we are right now, but perhaps with apps and, you know, other kinds of tools. And while there are many ways to use ICTs in qualitative research, today we're going to focus on the types of studies that involve communication with human participants. So I've been, you know, through the process of developing these books, etc., thinking about the ways that technology influences anything that we do online. When you think about your own personal life, you know, the way that you might communicate with someone using text messaging is going to be different than posting, you know, on a social media platform. And the choices you make, you know, influence the ways those interactions take place and who can participate and when they participate and how they participate. So, you know, as we start to think about how those decisions tie in with the research design, they really influence every part of it. And so that's why I like to take a holistic view. And with this framework, ethics are right in the center, because I think we make ethical choices throughout all of these stages. So, there are lots of questions within each of these topic areas, as well as across these areas. And we'll just focus on a few of these today. So the first one I want to talk about is, I think, very fundamental, before we even choose what kinds of tools we might want to use, we need to think about what the role or the purpose for that communication technology in relation to the study. So I'm offering three options here. And it may be that in the same study, you have more than one of these choices at play. But one of my, just kind of fundamental points is that whatever research you are designing, whether it is for a marketing project, an academic project, or even for journalism, there's probably someone who's going to need to sign off on it and approve it. And so the more precise we can be at explaining exactly what it is we're trying to do, the easier it will be for them to see and understand and give us the go-ahead. So these three choices: one is the media, using the technology simply as a medium for communication, or that we're thinking of it as the setting where the study is going to be conducted, or it may be that it's the phenomenon that we're studying the technology, and that's the basis of it. So let's kind of tease this out a little bit. So if I'm thinking about this as a medium, as the channel to access the participants, I might be thinking, well, my participant is in Africa or Asia, or somewhere that is different from my local place in Boulder, Colorado. So I need to somehow communicate with them across the miles, because I can't afford to get on a plane and go jet around to chat with them in person. So one of the things I might be thinking about, if this is my priority, could be that, maybe I'm studying parenting, or I'm studying, any topic has nothing to do with, may or may not have anything to do with the technology. But if I'm thinking about the medium, then I'm thinking, well, what is my participant comfortable with? What do they have access to? What do they prefer? What's easier for them? So, one of the kind of illuminating experiences I had at the Center for Advanced Internet Studies, where there were people from all over the world, was realizing that the kinds of tools that we're in right now, are not easily accessible to everyone. Not everyone has broadband. Not everyone has, the ability to use these kinds of tools, or the willingness to use them. So, if I want to have the widest possible pool of participants, then by leaving the choice of the technology more to the participant, then I have the ability to reach, pretty much anybody who has some level of access. Now, the implication for that might be that I'm going to have all different kinds of data. So, maybe one person wants to text message, and someone else wants to send emails, and someone else wants to use video conferencing. And now I've got all different kinds of data to analyze. So that's just one of the aspects of that. But then maybe maybe I have some particular features that I want to use. So, as you can see from my slides, I'm a very visual communicator, and, throughout all of my books, I'm developing visual models. So when I'm doing research about those models, I need a setting where I can share the visuals. Just being able to use audio only or text only would not be enough or the kinds of things that I want to do. So then as I'm thinking about what technology I'm using and the role that it's going to play in the study, I need to identify, what those features are and think about the tool that will be, that will allow me, that has the affordances to allow me to use those particular kinds of features. And here, I may have to accept that some people, don't have access to those kinds of features or don't have the ability or digital literacy to use them. And so some people may be excluded from the study. And that's just, kind of one of the things I need to think about. Now, another way to think about the online setting is, where is it that people are talking about the topic I'm interested in? Is there um, a, a discussion group within a social media platform? Is there an online community where people are talking about flexible work schedules or working at home with small children or, whatever the topic may be? And, then maybe I can find a way to gain access to the setting where the kinds of people I want to talk to are already hanging out. So those are some of the things I might think about around the setting. Now, obviously, within that setting, we're still going to have to make decisions about what medium we're going to use to communicate. But anyway, that's some questions to consider. And then if I'm thinking, about the technology as the phenomenon, then, the technology itself is central to the research problem. And so then I'm probably going to be much more specific about the technology because, if I'm trying to figure out like, why is it that today Zoom is not letting me use my video or why, how people use a particular tool or platform or something like that, then, that would be take a higher priority to the choices in the choices that I would make. So then once I start to think, and I should mention that, in my writings, if you read any of my books, you'll notice that I tend to not talk a lot about brand name tools, but rather to encourage you to think about the kinds of questions I'm discussing with you now, and then figure out what tool it is that will meet your needs, because not everyone has access to the same kinds of tools. They're called different things in different parts of the world, and I work with people all over the place, so I don't want to limit them to thinking about a particular brand. Also, as an internet user, you would know that the features within different platforms change over time. So so that said, one of the choices that I want to think about is, to what degree do I want to use a tool that has a synchronous interactions or an asynchronous interaction? And then I've put these on a continuum because, it's not always cut and dried, and we might have more than one type of communication. But I've also added what I call near synchronous. And so here, this would be, where we're having, kind of not necessarily an immediate response, but, we expect the person to respond soon. So if you think about, if you're sent a text message to a friend, maybe they're online right now and you chit chat back and forth, but maybe you're leaving them a message and a couple of hours from now, they're going to pick up that message and respond to you. Whereas with asynchronous, think more like, say, email, where we have a longer lapse between the time that we've given the message and the response. So what do these mean, in terms of research? So maybe what we want is for the participant to respond in the moment, that we want to know exactly, what are you thinking right now? How do you respond to my question or my prompt with what with what you remember about whatever the topic is that we're studying. I want, that natural kind of exchange that we have when we have a conversation with someone. I want to see their facial expressions and their kind of process for working through that question. But, maybe I want them to think about my questions before they respond. So then I might choose kind of either a near synchronous or an asynchronous option. So with the near synchronous, I can have more flexible timing that will be helpful if I have people in different time zones. I might use kind of techniques where I would send or post questions or prompts so that I'm getting the responses from people kind of as they are maybe experiencing whatever it is, that I'm studying right now. During the pandemic, I participated in a sleep study that some researchers were doing. I like to participate just so I can see how people do things. And they sent me, each day, a question, about my anxiety about COVID and whether I was sleeping or not. But then maybe we want even more time for the response. Maybe I want them to find examples or to collect up artifacts or materials to share. So I want to give them a little bit more time. So, there are a variety of reasons why we might want to use them and what, kinds of tools that we would use. So if we think about, synchronous video conferencing kinds of tools we're in right now, or text chat, or something where I'm going to make a time, schedule a time with the participant for this exchange. And then for the near synchronous and asynchronous, those might be, a forum or discussion board, like the iTracks board. It still could be a text messaging, email, diary methods or apps, as I mentioned, or even a questionnaire. And, again, as we go back to thinking about, who are our participants or our potential participants, what are they comfortable with? I mean, some people really love to have a conversation and, they enjoy that kind of back and forth. They like being able to see you and, have that human connection. And other people are kind of intimidated by that. They would, really rather have some time to think about things. So one of the options that I would suggest is that you can also think about how you might combine these. So, for example, in one of the studies that I did, one of the initial studies I did when I was a doctoral student, I wanted people to come to that interview with an example we could discuss. So that meant that I sent them the questions ahead of time by email. And I could use those email exchanges as a way to kind of get acquainted, to build some of the rapport and trust, so they could kind of get to know me and what I was trying to do. So then when we had that synchronous interaction, they came prepared to share their examples and discuss them. So then another question that we want to think about is, what kinds of data do we want to collect? So, are we interested in visual data, which could include images, photographs, artwork, video, maps, any kind of screenshots, or any sort of visual material? Are we interested in the oral data, which, at the most basic would be the spoken words we want to hear? Maybe we want to hear. We want to pick a tool that allows us to hear the person, because we want, a lot of nonverbal communication comes in the tone of voice. Do they get emotional when they're talking about their family, or how they interact in their communities, or how they feel about their jobs, or whatever, that we can we can learn a lot about their response just from their tone of voice and all of that we get from the oral data. But maybe, we're interested in things like, are there distracting sounds in their environment? What is the, other aspects of the setting that might be of interest, or are we interested in purely the written words? So another way of thinking about this question is that if I collected visual and or oral data, and again, today don't have time to go into the details about data analysis, but every choice that we're making at this design stage is going to have an implication when we get to the analysis point. So am I going to, say, transcribe that video and then analyze it in the form of written words? Am I going to transcribe or even use voice to text so that the spoken words I'm going to use in a written form? Or am I going to collect this data and record it in such a way that will allow me to do analysis from the kind of multimedia or media data itself? So this is another model to help us to kind of think through some of the options, specifically going to talk about the visual here today. So in the blue column, these are some of the kinds of things we can do with technology today. So, we can send images back and forth. I mean, at this point, everyone is walking around with a camera and a video camera in their pockets. We can take pictures and easily send them or post them either before, during, or after the interview, or I use the term research event when it might be more interactive, arts-based or creative type of research that goes beyond the interview. But we can send images, so that's one thing we can do. And then we can view them either on our own as the researcher or together with the participants. Those might be obvious, but then here are a couple more maybe perhaps you've thought about or not. One is that we can navigate. So we can go online using the kinds of tools we're in here today and use that as kind of a portal into looking at what is on the screen. So, I mean, right now I'm navigating a set of slides, but I could be showing you websites, or I could be showing you my newsletter, or I could be showing you games or 3D environments or any number of whatever it is I can access online. I can navigate through that. And then we can also create images. So, we're not only receivers of information online, we are participants in our online lives, and we have tools that allow us to create all kinds of visual materials when we are using technology. So then in the purple column, here are some of the ways we might use those activities in research. Could be that we are simply using them to communicate because we have a lot of abstract ideas, or we want to show, what are the relationships between the people in the family, the people in the organization in the community, or any number of kind of complicated thing that would involve reading pages and pages to figure out what you're talking about, but you could just show it, and that would allow the person to understand what you're trying to get across. Or we can use it as an elicitation. So here, we've got some kind of visual stimulus that we're sharing in order to gain a response or to get the conversation started with our participant. And then we can also collaborate. So here, this is where we kind of go from an interview to a much more, interactive kind of research event where, we're actually not just asking the person to recall, with a elicitation in any kind of interview. If I'm asking you a question, then you're trying to remember, well, let's see, when did I experience that, and what was it like, and what do I want to tell you about my experience, and that sort of thing. Whereas if we're creating something within the exchange, then think in terms of, say, like a simulation or a role play, where we're actually kind of doing something in the moment, and have a chance to see how people respond. So just to go into a little bit more detail, if we're thinking about the elicitation options, we could be using representational images that would be like photographs, videos, drawings, other kinds of materials that would be either about the people, the settings, their environment, etc. And I want to distinguish between the kinds of sources for those images. So it could be that you create the images and you or obtain the images, or it could be that you're asking the participant to collect or create the images. So, what difference would that make? Well, if you are creating the images, or you're using images that you have selected for the purpose of the study, then you have some continuity from one participant to the next, because everyone is responding to the same set of images. Also, you have the right to use those images. You've chosen or created images that are, your intellectual property or in the public domain, or you have the right, you've obtained the rights to use them. So you're able to use them in presentations or in publications. But if you are interested in the participants' experience and what they see, what they want to share, excuse me, then it's certainly much more personal to ask them to share images, how they're seeing the phenomenon you're studying, how they are experiencing, what's important to them, what their priorities are. And then in that case, you need to think about if it's something that you want to be able to use in a presentation or a publication. Are there, if they're pictures of the participant, then obviously anonymity has gone out the window. Or if they're pictures of other people who haven't given consent to be a part of the study, then that could be problematic. So those are just some considerations to think about. And then similarly, we might use non-representational kinds of diagrams, mind maps, different kinds of things. So let me just give you a few, I'll give you a few examples, in a moment. So we can, going back to, what I said at the beginning, that each one of these choices, ties in with another decision that you need to make. And here, we can think about these visual interactions in an asynchronous way by posting images or media in a private forum or a shared folder. So this would be a way of using the iTracks board, as a forum where we can post images and ask for responses. You can do that, also with, asking them to annotate or to post their own images in that in a forum, or even using email or another kind of asynchronous technology, like a research app could be used in that purpose. So here, I have a couple of examples from a project that I was doing, where I was asking a group of research methodologists to give me some input on my visual models. And so here, I posted the diagram, and they could use their annotation tool to show, red, yellow, or green. It's clear, it's not clear. And then, what is it I want to say about it? Or I could use videos. So in this same study, I made little videos where I explained the model. So then the people who were involved could watch that video and say, here's what I'm trying to do with this. Here's what, what it means, how what I want to know about it. And then they could respond to the video. So here we're using both in this example, both an image or a video, but in an asynchronous fashion. Then to give you some examples of the navigation process, which could also be either synchronous or asynchronous. So here I staged some with my husband, who's my willing participant here. So let's say if I were asking him, like, well, where, tell me about where you live and what are the important places, in your area that you want to tell me about. So, we could actually, navigate by looking at, physical map. Certainly we could have gone online and looked at, say, a map program and navigated that way to say, well, here are the different places that are important to me. And you could see how this could lead to some rich discussion. We could also navigate by looking at, here I used as example, going into, well, I could maybe perhaps I'm asking, how do you do archival research? Show me what kinds of sources you're using to study. And so here, I just did a little screenshot, and this was my lovely daughter, who was my willing participant here. So then, we can also use these elicitation techniques and the co-creation techniques using a synchronous tool. So, iTracks has real time, and, perhaps when I'm finished, Crystal will tell you a little bit more about some of those tools. But, we can use those in a synchronous manner. So here I wanted to give the example of using a shared whiteboard. So it could be that I can start by putting up the question on the shared whiteboard. I could even start with a blank whiteboard and start from scratch there. But for this example, I was just starting with the question, and then the participant could write response. So here you can see, going back to my question about, well, what kinds of data? So here we're in this multimedia environment, but we can still ask, get to have text responses to our questions, as a way to give the person a moment to think about and write the answer and then talk about it. Or maybe I create some categories here. So, instead of just having the blank question of, just the very broad, unstructured question of how does your experience contribute to well-being, now I've given them a couple of kind of, buckets, shall we say, where they could post their responses. So, again, going back to the implications for analysis, if I start with this broad question and I have a whole group of participants, then, they might talk about all kinds of different things. And now I've got, to really use a broad inductive process with my data to find the themes across my set of data. If I start with something like this, where now I've kind of created those larger topics, and then if I've used these same kind of 4 options with all of the participants, then I've got a chance to kind of organize my data, using those categories to begin with. So this might be, I'm going back to my research problem, and, I'm thinking about, what is it that I wanted to know? Maybe there are some more specific things that I want to know, or maybe I just want, to like put it out there and see, whatever kind of response I might get. I can similarly use photographs for this instead of words and a verbal or written question. So here, going back to my suggestion a moment ago, it could be that as a researcher, I have selected these pictures because, in fact, these are pictures that I took. So I know I have the rights to use these. So if I'm going to use this set of pictures with all of my participants, then I would be able to, in my presentations and publications, to say, well, here are the responses people had to the woods versus the water versus plants. I'm just picked a kind of generic question here just to give you an example. But, or, if my participant had given me these images, well, these are not, there are no people in these images. So, if that were the case, I would negotiate with my participant to say, I'd like to use the images that you, have shared with me to discuss my findings. We can also say, using the images and showing the relationships between the different ideas, or, highlighting more specific, kinds of things. So here would be an example of kind of the generating with these options I'm showing you. Here we're actually generating data, within the study versus simply a response to the question, because there are things that may come up that, are not, directly, like, say, a Q&A that we have in a straight interview. So I've given you a lot to hopefully to think about. And so I'd like to open it up and see what questions you have, what you, if you've tried any of these kinds of techniques yourself, if there are options that you'd like to know more about, and Crystal, if there are other points that you'd like to add in, feel free.
Sure. Thanks, Janet. So I did have a couple questions come in, and if you still have any questions for either myself or Dr. Salmons, please submit them either in the Q&A or in the chat portal. One question that I had submitted says, for this presentation, are the assumptions that participants are well versed in communicating a certain way? For example, they speak English and understand some terms researchers use in the US. What local contexts are factored into these designs?
Right. Well, certainly, like, I'm, with the amount of time that we have, giving you kind of a broad brush, but those are very, important questions, as like, so, under this category of selecting sources. So if I'm thinking about, who are the people I'm talking with, what is, what kind of digital literacy do they have? What are they most comfortable with? If it's someone who is, has a very basic level of technology use, then that goes back to the point of thinking about the medium. So, if what do they have access to? What are they comfortable using? What do they prefer? Do they want to be on the camera or not? That sort of thing. We can choose. I also think that in terms of your question of, well, say, how do we explain the study? How do we describe, what we want them to tell us about? I think you've made, a very important point about defining your terms. This is why, at the beginning of my presentation, I said, well, here's what I mean by qualitative research. Here's what I mean about qualitative online research. It might not be the same. Maybe others would define it differently, but this is how I'm defining it. So, to try to share some of that information, my feeling is that, as you're going through then, like thinking about this stuff, well, again, you can use these preliminary communications. So, if you're going, recruiting participants, and then, once they have consented to be a part of the study, then, how am I going to communicate with them so that they understand what it is, why, what is it I want to know, and why? How are you, if you're participating in my study, how are you contributing to making the world a better place? What is it how am I going to use what I learned from you? That goes back to the purpose of the study, and framing it in a way, that is going to make sense to that participant, and that will help them to see, why it's valuable to be a part of this study, that it's not just, some idle project so that I can check off a box on my CV, that, this is, there is something important about what I'm doing. And, again, going back to your point about defining terms, I think that it's interesting that, sometimes the same terms can be used very differently, even within the English language. When I'm working with people, colleagues from the UK, we'll have things where, it's like kind of like, well, what we call a dissertation, you call a thesis. So that would just be, like, how are we going to, what terminology are we going to use? But I think that, all of those exchanges give you the opportunity to, with every communication, think about every communication as an opportunity to develop trust and rapport with your participants.
Okay, thank you. And we just had a whole bunch of questions pile in here as well, so I'll get to them. Rima is wondering, what about the degree of attrition you may face? What is the researcher's approach to address this challenge?
Well, that it's a really good point, because I mean, when we're doing qualitative research, one of the hallmarks of research ethics that I think is common across the globe is that participation is voluntary, and that you can withdraw at any time. Well, if you're in a face-to-face interview and the person has to like actually get up and walk out of the room, that takes some guts. Whereas if you're online, all they have to do is click that little X in the corner of the screen and they're gone. And, maybe they don't respond to your email, like, no further communication, and you can't get them back. So this is why I mean, obviously you can't anticipate everything from the design stage, but what I try to do in my writing is to help people think through all of the things you can anticipate, to try to make this an interesting experience for participants, and to keep them engaged. One of the models in my materials that I did not share today, because we only have so much time, but to just give you an example, if I am using, let's say I'm using text messaging, and I'm going to have the exchange back and forth in writing. Well, I need to think through what those questions are going to be very carefully, because if I have some great big question, that person is not going to sit there and write for a half an hour about the story of their life. I want to take that very big question and break that down into a bunch of little questions, so that we can have that exchange keep, going back and forth, and keep the flow going. So, I think, if you design something, having, whether it's a formal pilot or just testing it out on, as you could see, I had my family members as models for my photo shoot. Maybe you have a colleague, a fellow student, someone that you can try it with, because, maybe you were thinking that this interview would last for 45 minutes, but, it's really going to take an hour and a half, and no one's going to be in an interview for that long, probably. Then those are things that you can try to test out. But my feeling is that by using these kinds of engaging options, like I've tried to show you here, using visual materials and different kinds of approaches, mixing up different kinds of questioning and prompts, that hopefully that will keep someone engaged to stick with the study.
Great, thanks. And you touched on, I had a couple more questions come in that were related to that. So we had somebody wondering, is there a guide to how long a single session should last? And then someone else wondering if you have any tips for building rapport during asynchronous research.
Well, I guess, I mean, I would say that, certainly, for, depending on the nature of, so for a synchronous interview, depending on the nature of what you're doing, and how whether you are have something that's more of a kind of straight questioning versus the interactive styles. Certainly, like an hour would be, I think, the maximum, but uh, that would be something to think about, in terms of your participants. If you had, young people or adolescents, maybe you want to make it a shorter interview, or maybe that's something that you want to discuss when maybe you have an option to say, would you rather meet with me for an hour, or could we meet twice and have two shorter interactions? In terms of the asynchronous, excellent point. So one of the things that I have done and have suggested is, now, here I created a little video. So this is asynchronous, but, they can see me, they can hear me, I'm talking, they can kind of get a sense. Yes. I mean, in today's world, let me just say, I started doing all of this before generative AI came along and all these kinds of tools that allow you to like make fake everything. And you'll notice that I didn't discuss those in this presentation. That's kind of a whole nother topic. But one of the things that I think is really important, and that when I started out, I would not have thought, oh, well, the first thing you need to do is make sure they know you are a human. But today, that is the case. So, one way is, like I say, creating some kind of video piece. It may be that you create a simple, if you're an individual researcher, obviously it's a different choice if you're part of a company or a larger institution. But, maybe you create either a place on the website, or create another, a blog or something, page, space online that is dedicated to the study. And here, it could be that you make this password protected, and once someone has consented, you give them access to it. That those are decisions to make depending on the sensitivity of the study. But, creating this kind of a page, you can prove you are human. You can also, so let's say you are a student, and you don't have a lot of credentials because you're new to this, but you could link to, here's my, I'm studying at this university. Here's my supervisor. If you have a question about my study, you can contact them. Whatever it is that's going to provide some credibility that you are who you say you are, and that you're, authentic and trustworthy and credible about the study. So, those are kind of both more personal things and more professional or credibility kinds of points that I suggest trying to make.
Great. And then the next question was submitted anonymously. It says, Janet, thank you for such a thought-provoking provoking talk. Could you please tell us how your research participants sign informed consent online? What online platforms or tools do you use for getting informed consent signed? And once you've given your response, I'll share something as well, if that's okay, Janet.
Okay, yes. So with consent, kind of depends on what is required by your institution, organization, etc. If verbal consent is acceptable, then that's something that you can do at the beginning of your interaction. If you're that's one option. I would suggest that even if you have done a prior consent, that when you get into an interview, in a platform like we're in right now, to just take just a couple of minutes and reiterate, okay, before we, you signed the consent, because maybe the consent form is like a bunch of legalese and they just scanned through it and didn't really, let's face it, who reads all those end user agreements, etc. So you might say, I just like to highlight a couple of points and make sure that you understand A, B, and C, those kinds of things. Otherwise, in terms of the written part of it, that really would be determined by, whatever your institution or organization requires. They could be that something like DocuSign, where you've got an online digital signature is fine. It may be that you still need a physical signature and they have to actually, either, fax it or send it in the mail, which sounds very analog, but, there might still be some places that would require something like that. Again, I just encourage you to use, instead of, I could do an entire webinar just about consent. But I encourage you to, rather than thinking of these kinds of things as a pain in the neck, to think about it as an opportunity to discuss your study, what's important about it, what you want to know, how their contributions are going to be beneficial. And, to use whatever interactions you have, rather than just saying, please sign this form, to say, my institution requires, a signature on this form, but let me just highlight a couple of points I think are really important. And let me just let you know that I respect your confidentiality, and here's how I'm going to protect the data. So that, instead of it just being, you've got the form that your institution or organization, legally has to have a signature on, add that personal point to it as well, so that again, that's helping them to see that you take the research seriously and respect them.
Thanks. And yeah, I love that. I'm going to show you something here, but even when I do collect consent for my own research, in a written way or in a digital way, I do love to reiterate it in the video portion and just make sure that they truly understand, because there's technically what we need, and then there's making sure that you do have that meaningful understanding. But if you can see my screen here, and Janet, maybe you can verify me for me. Do you
Yes,
see
yes,
an
yes,
iTracks project page up here?
yes.
I am going to show, for anyone who is using the iTracks platform to conduct their research, there is a way that you can do custom consent forms that you can require participants to check off before they participate in anything. And I'll just show you quickly how to do it here. So I am on a project page in the iTracks platform. So this is at a project level. It's called marketing focus groups, because that's where I kind of make all my marketing things. But if I go to edit settings here, I get this little slide out. And if I go to terms of service, I can create custom terms of service. So if I want, I can paste basically any consent form that I want people to have to read through and check off into this window here and have it totally customized. If you don't customize it, it's going to be your general iTracks like privacy policy in terms of service. But if you want a custom consent form, you can put that in here. And when you do that, I always like to check off this little box here, this show participant terms of service separately. Because that's going to make sure that they get a whole separate page as part of that registration process where all they see is this consent form that you've put in there, and that they do have to read through it and proceed past that and check it off before they're able to participate in the study. So if that's something that you're wanting to utilize, just to sort of make sure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, as far as everyone having seen a consent form, that is something that you can do within the platform. So that brings us to the top of the hour. So I would love to just thank you again, Dr. Salmons. I did paste some links into the chat there where you can find Dr. Salmon's newsletter link. There's a subscription link as well that was pasted in there, and I'll maybe do that again, just so that you can subscribe to her newsletter if you want. And with that, I will thank everyone very much for attending. I hope you found it useful. I know I sure did. I learned some new things as well. And we hope to see you again. The next webinar will likely be happening in the new year after everyone's recovered from the holidays. So thanks again. Thanks, Dr. Salmons. And we will see you all again soon.
Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to interacting with you. If you subscribe to my newsletter or I'm on LinkedIn, you can find me there as well.
And I'll send that link out in the follow-up email with the recording as well. I'll make sure everyone's got those links so that they can subscribe to Dr. Salmon's newsletter. All right, bye, everybody.